we think marriage, we think romance, right? You think romance. However, there's something like even more frivolous that I think, frankly, many people mix up with romantic love, which is like passionate, or I'm sorry, is like the playful but uncommitted love. It's essentially like promiscuity being confused as romance.
Yeah.
Like even, like romantic love in a like a Victorian kind of sense is passionate, but is tied up with this idea of like, oh, well, like it's passionately working its way toward marriage, as opposed to like people are passionately hooking up and then like swiping right, or whatever, swiping left, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, and so I think people have like conflated love with romantic love, and then conflated romantic love with like hooking up with people.
Well, I wouldn't go so
and
far.
Then like stumbled into like, oh hey, well, like I'm just like, so whoever I hook up with and feel comfortable hooking up with more than once, that's the person I marry.
I think that's going a little too far. I know that you have some perceptions of like
hookup culture.
Yes, hookup culture, which we're going to get to. Also, you promised we wouldn't talk about sex on this podcast, and then immediately we started talking about it. So
we wouldn't talk about having sex.
Okay. So a couple of things. One, you talked about the kind of confluence of that playful, uncommitted love. I don't think people think that is the basis of marriage, but I think that people worry that their relationships are not the one when they start to lose that. And so one of the things that immediately came to mind was, I wonder, like, if we talked to enough divorced people who then got remarried and then they were remarried for 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Do those people feel like, oh yeah, no, that first marriage was bad, and I have found it with this one, and I've got this like never-ending spark, or this, right, whatever it is. And it might be hard to accurately assess that, because the likelihood is like you went through some of the more trying times with the first partner, right? Because you're like newly married, financially probably not super stable because you're like earlier in your career, just having kids. It's like all the hard stuff in my mind in the beginning. And so maybe like by nature, like if you're 50 and you remarry, like, yeah, that person seems great because like you're not having to go through all the tough negotiation of like, raising children and all that.
Well, and that's how you hear about like divorcees always complaining like, oh, they're getting to benefit from all the hard work I put into fixing them.
Right. But so I do wonder, like, either, like, one, are people learning from those mistakes and that unrealistic point of view and then being happier in their second marriage because they're more content to be like, oh, I guess, like, that butterflies feeling isn't always there? Or do they find that with some other person and, like, we're the chumps that are, like, in our, that aren't, like, searching for that?
Well, what do you think the answer to that is?
Well, I think I just kind of answered it, which I think is like a lot of the hard stuff happens the first time around, and it's easy to step back and say, this isn't working for me, and step away if you don't have the commitment piece of marriage, of that kind of, the moral and legal, familial obligation to someone. But so I kind of feel like there might not be a fair comparison there, but I'm just interested to know, like,
It would be an interesting sort of survey to conduct.
Right.